Think about the last time you tried to fall asleep when you were just, like, really, truly exhausted, but your brain just wouldn't shut off.
Oh man, that is the absolute worst feeling.
Right. You lie there in the dark, you're staring at the ceiling, and you start commanding yourself to sleep.
Like squeezing your eyes shut and trying to force it.
Exactly. You focus on your breathing, you calculate exactly how many hours of sleep you'll get if you drift off right that very second. And, I mean, what happens?
You just get more awake. The harder you try, the more you force it. The more wide awake and anxious you become.
Yes. The only way to actually fall asleep is to, well, stop trying to fall asleep. You have to completely let go of the goal to actually achieve the goal.
It's like the ultimate paradox of the human experience. The moment you grasp at something with a clenched fist, it slips right through your fingers.
And that paradox that trying fails and letting go succeeds is exactly what we're exploring today. So welcome to this deep dive.
We're so glad you're here.
We are, and we are talking directly to you, the learner. Maybe you're sitting in traffic right now on your way to a high-pressure meeting, or maybe you're trying to figure out why your burnout feels so terminal these days.
Or maybe you're just endlessly curious about how to navigate this modern world without feeling like you're constantly pushing a boulder up a hill.
Exactly. We are going to bypass the dense academic jargon today and get straight to the life-altering insights, because our mission today is to examine a text that, it perfectly diagnoses our modern, frantic, hyper-optimized condition.
And the wild part about that diagnosis, it was written around 2.5 millennia ago.
2,500 years. It's just crazy.
It is genuinely staggering to read this text today. We're looking at Dr. Sanchayodsilp's Thai translation, which is itself based on Stephen Mitchell's really renowned English version of this ancient Chinese text.
The one attributed to Lao Tzu, right? The Tao Te Ching.
That's the one. And we are talking about 81 short poetic verses. That's the entire thing. You could read it in an afternoon.
But you could also spend an entire lifetime trying to actually understand it, because these aren't just pretty poems. They are massive reality-bending ideas.
Yeah, they really require a shift in perspective.
They do. This is a philosophy that actively resists being put into a neat little box, yet it offers some of the most practical, grounded wisdom you could ever apply to your daily life.
Right, like it doesn't hand you a list of 10 rules for success.
No, not at all. It doesn't give you a productivity hack. Instead, it invites you to completely dismantle and reconstruct how you view reality itself.
And that reconstruction, it starts with a very uncomfortable premise for the modern mind. Because before we can even begin to apply this wisdom, before we talk about burnout or leadership or anxiety, we have to confront the central subject of the text, the Tao.
Which translates roughly to the way, right?
Yeah, roughly. But as the text warns us immediately, the moment you put a label on it, you've already lost it.
I love that. The translation we are looking at hits you with this idea right out of the gate. It says, the Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Tao. Whatever can be named is not the eternal.
It's setting up this massive boundary line right at the start.
It really is. It argues that true, permanent, pre-existing reality has absolutely no name. And the second you give something a name, the second you slap a label on it, you are dealing with the temporary, just the impermanent surface level of things.
Let's unpack the psychology of that for a second, because humans are obsessed with naming things. Naming is how we exert control.
Oh, totally. We want to categorize everything.
Right. Think about how we operate today. We track our sleep cycles with wearable tech. We categorize our personalities with 4-letter acronyms.
We quantify our diets, our steps, our moods, our relationships. It's exhausting.
It is. We want a distinct label for every single emotion we feel, because if we can name it, we feel like we can manage it. We basically believe that identifying the thing is the same as understanding the thing.
It's the illusion of mastery, isn't it? If I know the exact medical term for my anxiety, I somehow feel like I'm in charge of it.
Yes, exactly. But the text is saying that this very instinct to label and categorize is exactly what blinds us to the deeper reality. The source notes that getting stuck on the name or the surface appearance keeps you from seeing the deep, dark root of understanding.
Because reality isn't a static spreadsheet.
No, it's entirely dynamic and formless. In chapters 1, 4, 14, and 25, the text describes this origin point, this Tao, as something that existed before the universe itself.
Wow.
Yeah, it's described as serene, empty, solitary, unchanging, and infinite. It's like a mother that gives birth to the universe, flowing through all things from the inside out and eventually returning to the source.
So it's an unbroken, continuous flow.
Exactly. When you put a name on a flowing river, you are conceptually freezing it. You trap a dynamic, moving reality into a static mental box.
It's kind of like looking at a menu at a restaurant and thinking you've actually eaten the meal.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right, because the word steak written in ink on a piece of paper is not the steak. It has no flavor, no texture, no heat. But we spend our entire lives chewing on the menu, arguing about the font the menu is printed in, and completely missing the actual food.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. And the text uses its own incredibly vivid imagery to describe this unnameable, formless reality. It describes the Tao as a well that never runs dry.
A well with no bottom.
Yeah, it has infinite possibilities precisely because it is empty. You can't see the bottom of it, but it is always providing. And in another section, he compares the Tao to a hollow bellows.
Like the tool a blacksmith uses to pump air into a fire.
Yes, exactly. Think about the structure of a bellows. It is completely empty inside. There's nothing in there.
Right, it's just air.
But that emptiness gives it infinite capability. The more you pump it, the more it produces. The emptiness itself is the engine of its power.
Okay, I hear all of this and it's beautiful, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
If the absolute first rule of the Tao is that you cannot name it, and you cannot speak of the eternal Tao without inherently corrupting it, what are we doing here?
I knew you were going to ask that.
I mean, aren't we completely missing the point by doing an hour-long deep dive, analyzing the very thing the text says cannot be analyzed? If the Tao is the wind and our words are a net, aren't we just swinging an empty net around right now?
That is the beautiful, maddening paradox of studying this philosophy. I mean, it's a completely fair question, but there's a very practical reason for the text to exist and for us to discuss it today.
Okay, I'm listening.
It comes down to a classic philosophical distinction, the difference between pointing at the moon and the moon itself. The words Lao Tzu wrote 2,500 years ago, the translations we're reading, the conversation we're having right now, none of these things are the Tao.
They're just the finger pointing.
Exactly. They are simply fingers pointing up at the night sky.
And if you just stare at the finger, you miss all the stars.
Precisely. If you get caught up in debating the exact grammatical structure of the ancient Chinese characters, or if you treat the text as an absolute dogma to be memorized, you are staring at the finger.
You're chewing on the menu.
Right. The text is a map. And a map is not the territory. It's a guide to help you look in the right direction. But eventually, you have to put the map down and actually walk the terrain yourself.
You have to experience the reality of it.
Yeah, the words are designed to help you exhaust your logical mind so that you can finally just perceive what's in front of you.
So the words are the vehicle, not the destination. Once you cross the river, you don't pick up the boat and carry it on your back. You leave it on the shore.
Exactly.
I can get on board with that. And realizing that the true nature of reality is formless and unnameable, well, it leads us right into the next major paradigm shift. Because if the ultimate reality is empty, it completely changes how we value our everyday physical world.
It demands a total inversion of how we're conditioned to operate.
Right, because we have to talk about why this philosophy places such an incredibly high premium on nothingness.
Yeah, from the moment we are born, we are taught to accumulate. We value the tangible. We want solid things we can touch, measure, put in a bank account, or display on a shelf.
More is always better, right? That's what we're told.
But the Tao argues that we have it entirely backwards. The physical material is just the boundary. The empty space is where the actual value lies.
There are 3 specific metaphors the text uses to illustrate this, and honestly, they completely rewired my brain when I read the source material.
They're brilliant metaphors. Let's hear them.
So it talks about a wheel, a clay pot, and a house. It says that you take wood and assemble spokes to build a wheel, but it's the empty hole in the very center, the hub where the axle goes, that actually allows the cart to move.
Right.
And you take wet clay and you mold it to make a pot, but it's the hollow, empty space inside the pot that allows it to hold water or rice. And you build walls and a roof to construct a house, but it's the empty space trapped inside those walls that makes the house livable.
It's undeniable when you frame it that way, isn't it? We work tirelessly with the tangible, but we use the intangible.
We create form just to capture the formless.
Yes. The clay of the bowl isn't the point. The emptiness is the point.
Let's bring this into the modern day for you listening. Think about your calendar. Think about your daily schedule. If you are like most people, you absolutely obsess over the clay.
Oh, people love to schedule every minute.
They do. You want to fill every single hour with a tangible, quantifiable task. A Zoom meeting, an email block, a gym session, a side hustle. We view empty time on our calendar as a failure, like a void that needs to be stuffed with productivity.
But if your calendar is a solid block of clay with zero empty space, the bowl is completely useless. It can't hold anything new.
Exactly. And that is exactly when we experience total burnout.
The psychological terror of emptiness is very real for modern people. I mean, if we aren't doing something, we feel like we're falling behind.
But the text is telling us that the empty space, the moments where nothing is scheduled, where you're just sitting on a park bench watching the trees or staring out a window, that isn't wasted time.
No, that is the hub of the wheel.
Mm.
That is the emptiness that gives you the capacity to actually function, process, and live when you are engaged in a task.
You cannot have a functioning wheel without the empty hub. And you cannot have a functioning life without empty time. Which, connects so deeply to this idea of duality that the text explores.
Right, because we are so focused on the solid parts, on the positive aspects of life, that we try to completely eradicate the negative or empty aspects.
And this is where the philosophy challenges our core understanding of reality. We tend to view the world in strict, warring opposites, don't we? Light versus dark, good versus evil, success versus failure.
And our entire life strategy is usually an attempt to isolate one half of the equation. Like, we want a life of pure success, pure happiness, pure light, with absolutely none of the dark.
But the text says that is literally impossible. It argues that opposites don't just oppose each other, they actually create and define each other.
It notes that the very second people recognize some things as beautiful, other things instantly become ugly.
Right. The moment you define something as good, you've inherently created the concept of evil. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. High and low depend entirely on each other.
Think about the concept of high. I mean, how can you possibly know what a high mountain is unless you have a low valley to compare it to?
You can't.
If the entire Earth was perfectly flat, the concept of high wouldn't even exist. The valley gives the mountain its height. Or think about music. The silence between the notes is what makes the music.
Right, if you just press all the piano keys down at once and never let up, you don't have music, you just have noise.
Exactly. The silence creates the melody.
And we spend our lives trying to delete the silence. We're trying to cut the bottom half off a magnet, thinking we can just keep the positive pole. But the moment you cut it, a new negative pole appears. You can't separate them. They're a single unified system.
Which brings us to one of the most jarring countercultural statements in the entire text. It applies this idea of inseparable duality directly to our personal ambitions and our egos.
Oh, this part is so good.
The text says, "Success is as dangerous as failure, and hope is as hollow as fear."
Okay, I want to stop right there, because if you say hope is as hollow as fear to someone today, they will look at you like you're a monster.
They really will.
We are practically brainwashed to believe that hope is the ultimate human virtue. It's the thing that keeps us going. If you're going through a hard time, people say, keep hope alive. So why on earth would Lao Tzu say that hope is hollow?
To understand this, we have to look at the psychological mechanism of hope and fear, and how both of them relate to the ego. The source material explains this beautifully. It argues that both hope and fear stem from the exact same root: the attachment to a fixed individual self that needs to be protected, validated, or advanced.
The ego.
Yes. What is hope, really? Hope is the ego projecting itself into the future, desperately wanting a specific outcome to validate its worth. Like, I hope I get this promotion so I can finally feel successful. I hope they say yes so I can finally feel loved.
So it's a rejection of the present moment.
Exactly. It's a rejection of the present in favor of an imaginary future.
And fear is just the exact same thing in reverse.
Precisely. Fear is the ego projecting itself into the future, terrified of an outcome that will diminish its status or comfort. I fear I will lose my job and be seen as a failure.
Both hope and fear rip you entirely out of reality. They pull you out of the present moment and trap you in an imaginary future that literally does not exist.
And there is this incredible analogy in the source material about success. It says that success is like climbing a shaky ladder.
A shaky ladder.
Yeah. Whether you are climbing up the ladder, experiencing the high of achievement, or climbing down the ladder, experiencing the low of failure, you are still in a precarious, fundamentally unstable position.
Let's explore why that ladder is shaky. I mean, the ladder represents external validation, right?
Mhm.
It's your job title, your bank account, your social status.
Right. And if you tie your identity to the rung of a ladder, let's say, your identity is, I am the vice president of this company,
Yeah.
you are constantly terrified of falling.
A market crash, a restructuring, a younger competitor, any breeze can knock you off.
And you spend all your energy clinging to the rung. The high is dangerous because you know you can lose it. The low is dangerous because it destroys your sense of self.
So what is the alternative? Just sitting in the dirt.
Well, the
Yeah.
alternative is realizing that you are not the person climbing the ladder. You are the ground the ladder is resting on. The text advises that if you view the world as yourself, if you realize you're not a separate, fragile ego that needs to be defended, but an integral part of the entire flowing system of the universe, there's absolutely nothing to fear.
If your identity is tied to the ground, to just being a living, breathing human being participating in reality, you literally cannot fall off. You are already at the foundation.
Yes, you don't need to hope for a better tomorrow if you completely accept and integrate with the present moment, whether the present moment is joyful or painful.
It completely short-circuits modern anxiety. I mean, imagine the profound baseline of peace you could achieve if you stopped attaching your self-worth to climbing that inherently destabilizing ladder.
If you realize that the good times cannot exist without the bad times, you stop fighting the tide. You just ride the waves.
But this brings up a massive, undeniable problem. And I know you, listening to this right now, are probably screaming this at your dashboard.
I can hear them now.
It's all well and good to talk about being the ground and dropping hope and fear and embracing emptiness, but we live in a physical world. We have physical bodies. We have physical responsibilities. So how do we actually act? If we aren't supposed to force things, if we aren't supposed to strive for success and fight off failure, what do we actually do when we wake up on a Tuesday morning?
This is where the philosophy transitions from abstract metaphysics into incredibly potent practical action. It introduces the supreme metaphor of the Tao, the physical element that best embodies how we're supposed to live.
Water.
Water. And with it, the concept of wu-wei.
Wu Wei.
Yeah.
This is arguably the most famous concept from the text.
It translates roughly to effortless action or non-doing, but it's vital to understand what that actually looks like in practice. Let's look at how the text describes water. It says that the highest good is like water.
Because water nourishes all things without trying, right?
Exactly. And it is perfectly content to stay in the lowest, darkest places that humans despise.
Humans want to climb to the top of a mountain to plant a flag and say, look at me. Water falls on the mountain and immediately seeks the lowest possible valley. It runs away from the spotlight.
But because it stays low, because it seeks the path of least resistance, it becomes completely unstoppable. Think about the physics of water.
Okay.
The text points out that the softest thing in the world overcomes the hardest thing in the world. Drop by drop, a soft, yielding stream of water will carve a canyon through solid granite.
Wow, yeah.
A rock is hard, rigid, and unyielding. It seems strong, but the rock is slowly destroyed by the water, precisely because the water yields. The formless can enter spaces that have no gaps.
This is such a stark, aggressive contrast to modern hustle culture. I mean, we are bombarded with messaging telling us to be like the rock, be unyielding, stand your ground, force your will upon the world, smash through obstacles, crush it.
Crush it, exactly. But the text gives a really chilling warning about that kind of rigidity. It observes the natural world and notes that in life, humans and plants are soft, supple, and flexible. But in death, they become stiff, rigid, and hard.
Rigidity is literal rigor mortis.
It's a biological fact that becomes a profound metaphor. The text concludes that whoever is rigid and inflexible in their thinking, in their actions, and their demands on the world is a disciple of death.
But whoever is soft, yielding, and adaptable is a disciple of life.
Right. A tree that cannot bend in the hurricane will snap in half. The soft grass that just flattens itself to the earth survives the storm and pops right back up.
Okay, I have to push back here because this is where the philosophy meets the pavement. And I want to make sure we aren't painting an unrealistic picture.
Fair enough.
Does wu-wei just mean being passive? Is it just glorified laziness? Let's say I'm an entrepreneur. I have a product launch in 2 weeks. I have a mortgage. I have kids to feed. If I just act like water and yield to everything, my business goes under and my kids go hungry.
Right. You can't just evaporate.
Exactly. How do I practice effortless action without my life completely collapsing? Surely I have to exert some force.
This is the most common and honestly most dangerous misunderstanding of wu-wei. People hear non-doing, and they think it means doing nothing.
Right.
Wu Wei is absolutely not laziness. It is not apathy. It is not lying on the couch waiting for the universe to bring you a sandwich. Wu Wei is about the quality of the action, not the absence of action. It is about moving with the current of nature, not against it.
So it's about friction.
Exactly. Think of it like swimming in a river. If you dive into a fast-moving river and try to swim directly upstream against the current, you will exhaust yourself.
You look around.
You will thrash, you will swallow water, you will panic, and eventually, yes, you will drown. That is how most of us live our lives. We decide on an arbitrary goal, and we try to force the universe to comply, swimming against the current.
And Wu Wei is turning around and swimming with the current.
Yes. You are still swimming. You are still making adjustments. You are still alert and active. But you have the entire force of the river behind you. You are acting without friction.
There's a quote from the text that speaks directly to this attempt to force outcomes. It asks, "Do you think you can improve the universe? I don't think it can be done. The universe is sacred. You cannot improve it. If you try to change it, you will ruin it. If you try to hold it, you will lose it."
Think about the psychological state of an elite athlete or a master musician when they are in what we call the zone or the flow state.
Oh, yeah.
An Olympic skier flying down a mountain at 80 miles an hour is exerting immense physical energy. Their brain is processing thousands of micro-decisions a second. But if you ask them about it later, they will say, "I wasn't even thinking. It was just happening through me."
Because there's no ego involved.
Right. They aren't worrying about what the crowd thinks. They aren't terrified of crashing. They're perfectly, seamlessly reacting to the mountain as it unfolds.
They aren't trying to force the snow to be different. They are yielding to the mountain, and that allows them to conquer it.
Yes, that is Wu Wei. When you apply this to your daily life, to that product launch or your mortgage, you still do your job. You still send the emails. You still build the product. But you drop the agonizing attachment to the result.
You stop trying to manipulate people into behaving the way you want.
When a door is locked, you don't break your shoulder trying to bash it down. You flow around it and look for an open window.
I love the idea of doing the work and then completely detaching from the outcome. There's a line that says, "Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity." You do your absolute best, but you don't tie your identity to whether the client says yes or no. You just did the work.
But to actually achieve that state, to act without ego, to flow like water without desperately clinging to outcomes, you have to undergo a massive internal demolition. You have to dismantle the ego.
And that brings us to what is easily the most controversial, counterintuitive, and dangerous-sounding section of the entire deep dive, the concept of the unconventional master.
Dangerous is the right word. Because to become this master, Lao Tzu essentially asks us to take everything society has ever taught us about being a good, smart, successful person, put it in a pile, and set it on fire.
He demands that we unlearn. He argues that the very structure society relies on to maintain order and prestige are actually the obstacles preventing us from achieving harmony.
We're talking about instructions to throw away holiness, throw away morality, throw away justice, and throw away the pursuit of knowledge.
Let me read how the text describes this master in contrast to normal people, because it is so incredibly weird. It says, "The master feels like an aimless fool. While everyone else in society is sharp, bright, purposeful, and driven, the master is dark, dull, and drifts like a wave on the ocean without a specific destination. Everyone else has a clear goal and a purpose. The master alone is ignorant and feels like a baby before it has even learned how to smile."
It is a total inversion of personal development. I mean, modern culture tells us that self-improvement is an additive process. Right?
Yeah, you read more books, you take more courses.
You acquire more skills, you memorize more facts, you add layers to your identity to become more complex and sophisticated. But the text explicitly challenges this. It says, if you pursue knowledge, every day something is added. But if you practice the Tao, every day something is dropped.
Dropping something every day, like peeling an onion.
Exactly. Until you arrive at non-action. The philosophy suggests that our desperate need to be seen as smart, our rigid moral superiority, and our endless accumulation of trivia are diseases of the ego.
There is a profound line that says, "Knowing you don't know is true knowledge. Guessing that you know is a disease." We walk around assuming we understand how the world works, and that arrogance blinds us.
You have to realize you are sick with the disease of certainty before you can be cured.
Okay, I can accept dropping my intellectual arrogance. I can accept dropping my need to be the smartest person in the room, but I have to stop you here and raise a massive red flag.
I sense a but coming.
Throwing away justice and morality. If I sit here and tell you, the listener, to abandon your sense of morality and throw away the concept of justice, that sounds like an endorsement of anarchy.
It does sound like that.
That sounds like a recipe for a terrifying, lawless society where the strong just devour the weak. How does Lao Tzu justify telling people to abandon morality?
It's the most critical question you can ask, and it requires us to look deeply at how the text views the evolution, or rather the devolution of human society.
Okay, walk me through it.
The justification is rooted in a fascinating psychological and sociological argument. The text outlines this devolution step by step. It says that in the beginning, when people are naturally in tune with the Tao, when they are balanced, compassionate, and flowing with nature, they just do the right thing instinctively.
Like breathing. You don't have to read a rule book on how to breathe.
Precisely. That natural state of unforced harmony is the highest form of living. There is no concept of morality because nobody is considering doing anything immoral. But as society grows complex and loses that natural connection to the source, something has to fill the void.
What fills it?
The text says, when the Tao is lost, goodness replaces it.
Goodness. As a negative thing.
Yes, because goodness implies a conscious effort. It implies a separation. You are no longer just being, you are looking at your actions and labeling them as good to stroke your own ego.
Ah, you're performing goodness.
Exactly. But then as society degrades further, even that performance fails. So the text says, when goodness is lost, morality replaces it.
Meaning codified rules.
Exactly. Morality is a system of artificial rules designed to force people to behave well because they no longer have the internal compass to do it naturally. It's an external cage.
Wow.
And then, the text warns, when even morality breaks down, ritual replaces it. And ritual is defined as the mere husk of faith, empty conformity, and the beginning of absolute chaos.
Okay, let's look at the psychological mechanism behind that. Why does imposing artificial morality actually lead to chaos? I think it comes down to a psychological concept called reactance.
Reactance, right.
When human beings are given a strict external rule, thou shalt not do X, our immediate subconscious impulse is to feel our autonomy is threatened. We start looking for loopholes. We start asking, well, what exactly defines X?
Yes. When you replace natural empathy with a rule book, people stop asking, does this action harm my neighbor? And start asking, is this action technically prohibited by Section 4, Paragraph B?
Artificial morality creates lawyers, not good people.
It removes the heart from the action. When Lao Tzu says, throw away morality and justice, he isn't advocating for violence or cruelty. He is saying that our obsessive, rigid systems of justice are just treating the symptom of a much deeper disease. They are Band-Aids on a gunshot wound.
If we return to the root, to the natural flow of the Tao, we wouldn't need the external laws because internal compassion would dictate our actions.
Precisely. The goal isn't to be lawless. The goal is to outgrow the need for the law. And the text tells us exactly what this natural, unforced goodness looks like. It introduces the Master's 3 treasures.
These are the only 3 principles you need to navigate life and return to the source.
That's it. Number 1, simplicity. Number 2, patience. Number 3, compassion.
Simplicity, patience, compassion. Let's break those down.
The text explains them beautifully. It says, be simple in your actions and your thoughts, and you return to the source of being. This means dropping the overcomplication, the mental chess games, the constant plotting.
Patience.
Be patient with both your friends and your enemies, and you accord with the way things are. This is the water metaphor again. Patience is letting the river flow at its own speed instead of trying to push the water faster.
And the third one, compassion.
The text says, be compassionate toward yourself, and you reconcile all beings in the world.
Notice the phrasing there, compassionate toward yourself. It doesn't start by saying you have to go out and save the world. It starts internally, which ties right back to the idea of non-duality.
Yes, it does.
If you truly understand that you are not separate from the universe, then treating yourself with deep, forgiving compassion naturally and inevitably extends to how you treat everyone else. You can't poison the well you drink from.
Exactly. And this brings us back to that strange image of the Master appearing dull and foolish. Being foolish just means you have completely opted out of the rat race. You have stopped competing in the ego Olympics.
You don't need to prove how clever you are in a meeting. You don't need to win the argument on the internet. You're content to just sit quietly in the back of the room.
The text uses the metaphor of a baby to illustrate this perfect, unforced harmony. It notes that a baby's bones are soft, its muscles are incredibly weak, yet if it grabs your finger, its grip is surprisingly strong.
And a baby can cry all day long and never lose its voice. Why? Because the baby has no ego. It isn't trying to project an image of a crying baby. It simply exists in its current state. There's no internal friction.
It is the embodiment of Wu Wei. Total, uninhibited energy flowing without the blockage of self-consciousness.
I think we could all use a little more of that baby energy. Imagine going through a workday without that constant, exhausting internal monologue, critiquing your every move, analyzing how your boss perceived your email, worrying if your shirt makes you look authoritative, just existing.
It is a profound internal liberation. But as we move into the final major theme of our deep dive, we have to scale this philosophy up. If a person actually achieves this internal state, if they unlearn societal norms, embrace simplicity, drop their ego, and flow like water, how do they operate in a position of power? How do they lead others?
We are moving from personal internal philosophy to the real-world dynamics of governance, management, and power. Whether you are running a country, managing a corporate team, or just trying to lead your family, the text has incredibly specific instructions.
And it lays out a brilliant hierarchy of leadership.
It categorizes leaders into 4 distinct levels. And I want you, the listener, to think about the bosses you've had or the politicians you've observed as we go through this list.
The absolute worst type of leader is the one who is hated and despised by the people. The third bet, so one step up from the bottom, is the leader who rules by fear and intimidation. The people obey, but only out of terror.
The tyrant.
Right. Then we move to the second best leader. This is the leader who is loved and praised by the people.
Which is fascinating because by modern standards, that is the absolute pinnacle. Every CEO, every politician, every influencer on earth wants to be beloved. They want the magazine covers. They want the glowing reviews. But Lao Tzu says being loved is only second best. So what is the number one absolute highest form of leadership?
The greatest leader is the one that people barely know exists.
The invisible leader.
Yes. The text says that when the invisible leader's work is done, the people will look around and say, we did it ourselves.
That is just phenomenal. It strips the ego entirely out of leadership. The goal isn't to get the credit. The goal is to empower the ecosystem to function perfectly on its own.
And the methodology for being this invisible leader is encapsulated in one of the most famous and, frankly, delightful metaphors in the entire Tao Te Ching. It's a single sentence governing a large country is like cooking a small fish.
I love this one.
I want to hear your take on this because it translates so well to modern dynamics.
Okay, so if you have ever cooked a very small, delicate fish in a frying pan, you know that the absolute worst thing you can possibly do is keep poking it with your spatula. If you constantly prod it, flip it, adjust it, and mess with it, the fish just falls apart into a mushy, inedible mess in the pan.
So what's the alternative?
The only way to cook a small fish perfectly is to gently place it in the hot oil, give it the right environment, and then step back and completely leave it alone.
And how do we see that poking manifest in the workplace or in governance?
It is the ultimate ancient argument against micromanagement. I'll give you a real-world example. I once had a manager who was terrified of a project failing. So she implemented a rule where we had to give a status update meeting every morning and send an end-of-day progress report every evening.
That sounds exhausting.
She was constantly pinging us on Slack, tweaking our spreadsheets, rewriting our emails before we sent them. She was aggressively poking the small fish. And what happened? Our morale completely tanked.
Because you couldn't do your jobs.
Right. We stopped taking initiative because we knew she would just override it anyway. We spent more time managing her anxiety than actually doing the work. The project completely fell apart. Not because the team was incompetent, but because the leader wouldn't step back.
That is a textbook violation of the Tao. The text explicitly supports your experience. It states, the more prohibitions you have, the less virtuous people will be. The more weapons you possess, the less secure people will be. The more laws you make, the more thieves and criminals there will be.
Over-legislation breeds rebellion and deceit. If you treat people like criminals who need to be contained, they will start acting like criminals.
Exactly. The text promises that when a leader drops heavy-handed laws, the people naturally become more honest. When the leader stops constantly interfering in the natural flow of the economy or the project, the people naturally become prosperous.
The best leader acts as a shadow.
They create the fertile environment, they remove the obstacles, and then they disappear. And importantly, they place themselves conceptually below the people they lead.
This goes right back to the water metaphor. There is a beautiful observation in the text about geography. It points out that all rivers and streams naturally flow down to the sea. Why? Because the sea is lower than they are. Humility gives the sea its immense attractive power.
The text advises that if you want to lead people, you must learn how to walk behind them. If you want to govern them, you must place yourself below them.
Think about the psychological impact of a leader who genuinely views themselves as a servant to their team, rather than a master over them. When a leader is positioned below the people, supporting their weight rather than standing on their necks, the people don't feel oppressed.
They don't feel manipulated or managed.
Exactly. They feel supported, which allows them to take risks, innovate, and thrive.
But I have to ask the difficult real-world question here. This all sounds beautiful for a harmonious team. But what happens when conflict inevitably arises? How does a Taoist leader handle genuine threats, bad actors, or even outright war?
That's a great question because we don't live in a utopia.
We live in a world with real dangers and malicious forces. Does the leader just yield and let the country be destroyed?
The text is deeply pragmatic, but its perspective on violence and conflict is incredibly sobering, and it entirely rejects the glorification of combat. It addresses this directly. It states that anyone who uses the Tao to govern will never eagerly use force to resolve issues, and they will not rely on weapons to intimidate the world. Because of the fundamental law of cause and effect, violence, even when utilized with the best intentions, always recoils. Force is always met with equal resistance. A society built on weapons will inevitably become a victim of weapons.
The source notes that a good person, a wise leader, avoids weapons except in the most extreme, dire, unavoidable necessity. They don't use them preemptively. And even when forced to use them, they do so with the utmost restraint.
There is a line regarding conflict that I think is one of the most haunting and profound statements in all of philosophy. It says that a wise leader does not glorify victory in battle, because to rejoice in a military victory is to literally rejoice in the slaughter of human beings.
That's heavy.
The text dictates that when a leader is forced by circumstance to enter a war, they do not do it with marching bands and jingoistic pride. They do it with deep, profound sorrow. They enter the battlefield as if they are attending a funeral.
As if attending a funeral. That completely shatters the myth of the heroic war. There is no triumph in destruction. It strips away all the flags and the anthems and forces you to look at the reality. The enemy you are fighting is not a demon, not an abstract concept. The enemy is a human being exactly like you.
It is a radical empathy that stems directly from the core realization of non-duality we discussed at the very beginning.
Right.
If you truly understand that there is no separate self, that the illusion of division is just a trick of the naming mind, then destroying another human being is fundamentally destroying a part of yourself.
You are cutting off your own arm to save your hand.
You cannot win a war against yourself. You can only survive it with grief.
Exactly. And that brings us full circle.
It does. We have covered immense, reality-altering philosophical ground today. Let's synthesize this journey for you, the listener, so you can actually carry this forward into your day. What is the ancient diagnosis for our modern condition?
First, it teaches us that the ultimate truth of the universe is a continuous flow that cannot be trapped by names, labels, or data points. Our obsession with categorizing everything is making us blind to reality.
Second, it completely flips our value system. It shows us that the greatest utility actually comes from empty space. The empty time on your calendar, the silence in your day, is not wasted space. It is the hub of the wheel that allows your life to move forward.
Third, it shows us through the metaphor of water that the softest, most yielding element will always overcome the hardest rock. Effortless action wu-wei, swimming with the current instead of fighting the river, is vastly superior to the forced, ego-driven hustle culture we are suffocating under.
Fourth, it redefines what it means to be wise. The smartest mind is the one that knows it is ignorant. It asks us to unlearn the rigid, artificial morality society forces upon us, and instead rely on the natural internal compass of the three treasures: simplicity, patience, and compassion.
And finally, it redefines power. The most transformative leader is the one who is entirely invisible, the one who supports from below, creates the environment, and then gets out of the way, rather than micromanaging the small fish until it falls apart.
So we want to challenge you today. Look at your own life right now. Where are you gripping the steering wheel so tightly your knuckles are white? Where are you trying to force an outcome at work or trying to manipulate a relationship that simply isn't working?
What would happen if you stopped poking the fish?
What if you were a little more like water? What if you settle into the low places, yielded just a fraction of an inch, and let the natural current do the heavy lifting for you?
It is a profound, lifelong challenge. But as we wrap up this deep dive, there's one final, brilliantly provocative thought from the text that we have to leave you with. It is a paradox designed to break your brain one last time.
Lay it on us.
It comes from the very last chapter, chapter 81, which was in our source material but we haven't touched on yet. The text explicitly states, truthful words are not beautiful, beautiful words are not truthful. A wise man does not need to prove his point. Those who need to prove their point are not wise.
Oh, wow. Okay, I want you to really think about the implication of that. The very text we just spent an hour unpacking, translating, and dissecting, the Tao Te Ching itself, is widely considered to be one of the most exquisitely beautiful pieces of poetry and philosophy in human history.
So does that mean Lao Tse is warning us right at the end that even his own beautiful words are ultimately an illusion?
Is he telling us that because the poetry is beautiful, it cannot be the ultimate truth? Are we supposed to read this masterpiece, learn its profound lessons, realize it is just a finger pointing at the moon, and then completely throw the book away?
It brings us right back to our opening metaphor, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you are finally asleep, you no longer need the technique you use to fall asleep.
That's brilliant.
Maybe this philosophy isn't a doctrine you are supposed to carry in your pocket and defend forever. Maybe it's just the medicine. And once you are cured, once you are truly flowing like water, you just throw the empty bottle away.
You don't need the map once you know the territory. You just enjoy the walk. We are going to leave that question hanging in the air for you to ponder.